Welcome into the Arrowhead Pride Rapid Reaction Show. I am Steven Serda, joined as always by my guy, Rocky Magana. Rocky, Kansas City Chiefs are undefeated when playing down to an opponent. It's something that feels like we can expect each and every week when they're playing a bad football team, but again, for the second week in a row, it is ugly. They probably deserve to lose the game in multiple ways, but they find a way to get it done, and they beat the lowly Houston Texans 30-24 to clinch the AFC West crown for the seventh consecutive victory. And Jacksonville just got a pick six to beat the Dallas Cowboys in overtime. Weird day of football, Rocky. How you feeling?
Oh man, this is the way that the battle for the West ended. Not with a bang, but with a whimper, as T.S. Eliot once wrote. This is not the game we expected or that we wanted, but it's the game that we got. And we'll take the division title, but you can't feel good about this team moving forward, heading into the playoffs. They are not peaking at the right time. It seems like they're doing the opposite of peaking. They are valleying at the wrong time, Stephen, and you can't feel good about the direction they're moving in.
Yeah, this game was tough. There's more red flags coming out of this game than even last week, and a poor performance against the Denver Broncos, which I was willing to chalk up last week to, hey, that's a divisional game. Those are weird sometimes, and you struggle against teams that you play multiple times a year and teams that know you really, really well. That was not the case against this Houston Texans team. And I understand that the Texans almost upset the Dallas Cowboys and the Jags did just upset the Dallas Cowboys. But when you're the Kansas City Chiefs and you have Patrick Mahomes, it's not really acceptable to have a performance this bad. And I was going to start with things offensively, and I want to get into the kicking issues and the referees and the flags and all of that because it all impacted this game in negative ways for the Kansas City Chiefs. But I think where we have to start is with this defense. And we're at the point in the season, Rocky, where the Kansas City Chiefs defense is going to be the biggest thing that stops this team from finding success in the playoffs. For the second consecutive week, this defense looks like it is in shambles right now. Against the Houston Texans, again, a one-win football team, the defensive line generated zero pressure today. I don't even know if Chris Jones was active in today's contest, to be totally honest, because I didn't notice him a single time today. The Chiefs defense cannot get off the football field. They cannot force turnovers, even though they did come up with that big one in overtime against Davis Mills. Again, one-win football team. But for 95% of the football game, the defense did not play well. And for the second consecutive week, they looked totally lost at multiple times throughout the game.
Spagnuolo said this week during his press conference that the Chiefs need to do a better job of playing transition defense after turnovers, right? Like he said, when the offense turns over the ball, we got to get on the field, stop the opposing offense, and get off of the field. They did not do that today. They didn't stop the opposing offense, period. Like Davis Mills is not an NFL quality starter. There's a reason why they've been playing two quarterbacks and bringing Jeff Driscoll in because Davis Mills isn't good enough on his own. But for the second straight week, we saw a struggling quarterback come in and look like a Pro Bowl quarterback. Like this defense, they're undisciplined, they're unexplosive, they don't create turnovers, but what they do is create a lot of penalties. Like they give away free yards. Like they're like one of those guys that shows up at the grocery store during Christmas time and buys everybody's groceries. Like they're just buying groceries for the opposing offense left and right and just letting them march their way down the field. Like, I'm sorry, but this defense is an embarrassment right now. And I know that somebody called me out, in the comment section for saying that this defense was an embarrassment a couple weeks ago, but this is 3 straight weeks of subpar performance by our defense. At some point, it's no longer an outlier. It's a trend. And a trend becomes a fact if it happens long enough. And so I don't see an upside for this defense right now. They're not playing up to the level that's expected, and they're not playing like a playoff caliber team.
I think the most frustrating part about this defense this season is we saw promise early in the season. And now when you go back and look at it and you really try to dissect some of those performances where we were like, man, they've got so much young talent. They've got so much room to grow and get better as the season goes on. And Spags defenses normally struggle to start the year and then they come on late. That's always kind of been his MO. And it's just been the polar opposite this season. And now you're starting to question, like, what are we getting out of these young players? Like, are these young players turning the corner? Because it doesn't seem like they are now. It seems like they're moving backwards. And the most frustrating part, I think, is, not the linebacker play, not the run defense, not the inability to get off the field in third down situations and third and shorts and the tackling and all of that. It's the defensive line that is not generating pressure now. And yeah, I understand that they've gotten a lot of sacks this season. I understand that Spags has been good at the blitzes and dialing things up, but it's pretty evident to me at this point in the season that they cannot generate enough pressure with this defensive line. And when you get into the playoffs and you play the best teams in football, it's going to be a huge problem for them defensively.
Yeah, it's going to be a huge problem because they have all these resources sunk into the defensive line and they cannot create pressure without blitzing. And then sometimes when they blitz, they still can't create pressure. Like, the Chiefs have invested all this money into pass rushers, but outside of Chris Jones, who I understand he did have an illness this week, so some people may give him a pass saying they had a quiet week because he was sick. Okay, give Chris Jones a pass. Outside of Chris Jones, there's not a consistent, reliable pass rusher on this team. Carlos Dunlap is fine, but he's not. He's fine. He's not good. He's fine. But because the rest of the team is so bad, he seems good. It's the same thing with Melvin Ingram last year. We were so pass rush deficient that Melvin Ingram seemed like a superstar to us. He wasn't a superstar, and he's not a superstar this year either. He's fine. But we have a lot of guys who are fine, and we have no difference makers in the pass rush outside of Chris Jones. So if Chris Jones has an off day, then it's just completely absent, and there's no pass rush.
It's gotten to the point this season, and you hope that you can still develop George Karlaftis into being an impact player, and I think that George can be that. But right now, during his rookie season, like, he is a serviceable defensive end. He is not a game-changing defensive end, at least not this year, not what we've seen from him this season. But it's just so frustrating because we talk about this defensive rebuild that they went through over the offseason and, looking like, maybe you did get a lockdown corner in Trent McDuffie, who struggled again today for the second consecutive game. L'Jarius Sneed did actually play pretty well, like one of the few Chiefs defenders who had a nice game today. But man, it feels like the way this thing is trending, the Chiefs are going to have to go through a rebuild of that defensive line this offseason. And I don't really know where you find the answers there. Chris Jones is somebody that's going to be looking for more money soon. And they have to make a decision with him. He's obviously the best player on your defense, and it's not really that close. And then you've got a bunch of other guys that you're just kind of hoping turn things around, or you've tried to go address it in the draft. But again, there's a lot of numbers out there that say drafting these guys late in the first round, where the Kansas City Chiefs are going to be drafting, you don't have a very high likelihood of them becoming day one starters or high impact players. And then you start talking about free agency, and there's just, at one point this season, the future seemed bright for this defense, and now it's totally shifted over the last couple of weeks, where it's like, it doesn't feel like this defense is good enough. It feels like the Chiefs are going to have as many questions this offseason about that side of the ball as they had last offseason. And all of a sudden, it's just hard to feel good about the Kansas City Chiefs, even in a win. And as frustrating as that is, I'm usually the guy that's like, no, it's a win. It's a win. You got the job done. Okay. But this is the kind of win where you say, well, yeah, you're just better than the Houston Texans. The Texans had no business being in this football game, and you certainly had no business going to overtime. Like, it was just another bad performance from the Kansas City Chiefs, even in a win. And the red flags are merited right now, Rocky.
I mean, you look at 3 weeks ago against the LA Rams, and you said, okay, the Chiefs probably should have beat the Rams by more than 16 points because they were a much better team, but they kind of let the Rams hang around because the Rams have a good defense and the Chiefs didn't play their best football, blah, 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 blah. Go to the next week. Oh, wow, okay, we're going to blow out the Denver Broncos. oh wow, Chiefs got up 27-0, and then they took their foot off the gas, or they got too confident, or they don't know how to play with the lead, or blah 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 blah. We let the Broncos get back in the game, but it's okay because we're going to be playing against the 1-10-1 Houston Texans next week, and that's going to be our get right game. That's going to be the game where we go out there, we put the pedal down, and we blow out a team. But what happens? They take us to overtime. Things are progressively getting worse the further we go. And I understand the idea about that. Okay, you can say that the Chiefs aren't ever in a position because of their success to draft elite pass rushers. But guess what? 10 out of the top 20 sack leaders this year are either not first-round draft picks or not playing with their first team. Okay, so half of the top sack leaders in the NFL are first-round draft picks playing with the team that they drafted them. There's still the other half of those sack leaders that are on their second team or were not drafted in the first round. You can find production if you could either A, scout, or B, coach. Because you can't tell me Karlaftis wasn't a prospect coming into this year. He was. And so guess what? If he's not doing something, then that's on the coaching. That's on Spags. That was Spags' guy. Spags needs to coach him up and get some production out of him. I'm sorry. Like, whatever happened to, what was it, back in the day, Tom Bahali, right? He took it upon himself to start working with the jiu-jitsu master. Was it Master Joe Kim, right, on the hand fighting? Like, where's our football players going out there, find a jiu-jitsu master to teach them hand fighting, to give them the edge, to get around the edge and to get to the quarterback? Like, it's not good enough to bull rush yourself right into the left tackle. And if you don't beat him off the snap, say, oh, well, I tried, and just keep reaching. Just keep reaching like you're some kind of freaking zombie trying to grab the quarterback. Engage with the offensive lineman, hand fight with him, and beat him. You know what makes Von Miller so great? He's got a great dip, he's got a great bend, and he's great at hand fighting. He's a complete pass rusher. We don't have a single complete pass rusher on the team. Chris Jones beats people because he's a monster and he's a huge physical specimen. But as far as technique goes, our pass rushers are so technique deficient, it's embarrassing. And that's on Spags.
It's particularly frustrating not generating pressure against this Houston Texans team when, I talked to our friend from the Arrowhead Pride Podcast Network, Ron the Show Hughley, who works in Houston and covers the Texans earlier this week. And he told me all about this Texans offensive line. He was like, they should be able to destroy them. Like, Laramie Tunsil's a good player, but everybody else is a red flag along that offensive line. And the Chiefs did not generate pressure at all today. Like, they were struggling to disrupt Davis Mills in any way. And I understand Chris Jones was out sick this week with an illness, so maybe that did have something to do with it. But man, it's when he's the only guy who can do it, when he's the only game wrecker, like, you just need him to come up and make a play. And he was absent today. Everybody else struggled, but ultimately the huge game-changing play that got the Chiefs the victory is the overtime fumble by Davis Mills that was recovered by Willie Gay. So the Chiefs do get it done, and that they're able to get that done. But I want to move to the offensive side of the ball and talk about that performance a little bit, because that wasn't pretty either. But if you just look at the box score, it looks good. Like, the numbers look pretty good. The offensive output looks pretty good. Patrick Mahomes winds up with a huge game, 36 of 41, 2 touchdowns, 336 yards. Isaiah Pacheco, 15 carries, 86 yards. McKinnon adds another 10 carries for 52 yards in the game-winning score. He also gets into the end zone in the passing game again, has another 8 catches for 70 yards today. Kelsey's over 100. Juju's got 88 yards. MVS made a couple of big catches. But it was still, at the end of the day, just sloppy things. And they got flagged a ton. And this referee crew, who Kansas City Chiefs fans know well, Carl Cheffers, is a joke and doesn't belong on an NFL field, but he continues to have a job, and he will continue to call NFL games, and he will continue to be terrible at it and throw plenty of flags against the Kansas City Chiefs. But it's the Chiefs offense is still going to be the reason you win football games. It's going to be the reason that they hopefully find success in the playoffs, but it was just a sloppy all around performance in every facet for the Kansas City Chiefs against the Texans today.
Oh my God, it was extremely sloppy. I mean, turnovers and penalties, right? Like those are the two things that you need to mitigate. You need to be positive in the turnover differential, and you need to play clean football and not commit a lot of penalties. And yeah, Carl Sheffers sucks. He sucks as a referee. Everybody knows that. But guess what? The Chiefs played sloppy football, and more than half of the penalties called on them were their own fault, and they got penalized at the wrong time. Like they did not play good situational football on the offensive side of the ball, and then they turned the ball over. You know, there was what, 2 fumbles, one by Juju, and then the other one by Pacheco. Like that's Pacheco's 4th fumble of the year. If you want to be a lead NFL running back, you got to hold on to the ball. Like you just can't give the ball over in those situations against a bad team. Like all you're doing with these penalties and these turnovers is keeping a bad team in the football game. Like if you hold on to the ball on both of those drives and then score, this isn't even a game. Like that's the thing. Like the Chiefs, like the offensive players, if you go player by player, they didn't play bad games, but collectively they didn't play smart situational football. And that even goes down to like playing for the field goal at the end of the game instead of the touchdown. Like, I mean, like this Chiefs offensive team just doesn't seem to have a killer instinct in them. They don't wake up until they're losing. They can't play with the lead. They don't get the lead, and then they have to find some sort of chip on their shoulder to get angry to actually come back and start playing. It wasn't until Travis Kelce got his personal foul because Desmond King wouldn't get up off of him that the offense even woke up and started playing in this game. They came out completely flat, and the first 2 drives of the game and just went 3 and out. Essentially. And like, you got to be able to find a way to get fired up without being behind or without feeling like somebody has wronged you. Like playing the game and winning the game and winning your division. Like if going out and winning your division isn't enough to get you fired up, then I don't know what is. Like you're playing the game. Like, why are you even playing the game if you're not going out there to win your division? Like the fact that this Chiefs team needs an external motivation to get them going is an issue.
Yeah, and I don't know what that is. I don't know if it's this confidence in Patrick Mahomes because he's the best player in the world, and it's something that they've struggled with for the last couple of years. But the referees were a huge issue in this game. And, Carl Cheffers is the referee who Chiefs fans earlier this season at Arrowhead Stadium, it sounded like that Chiefs fans spooked him and his voice was cracking. And so I think it's safe to say that he might have a little bit of a vendetta against the Kansas City Chiefs. But I think that a lot of the flags were bogus and heinous in this game and just absurd. But that's kind of the way things go now in the NFL. There's bad flags each and every week. There's poor refereeing all across the league, and it does impact games, but it's something we just have to live with until they address it in some way, which I don't know if that's ever going to happen. But the reason I was most frustrated with the Chiefs' offensive performance, and this is a game where they trailed 14-13 at the half because Harrison Butker misses another extra point. But the most frustrating part of this game, and the Chiefs definitely gave the Texans opportunities to win this football game, was the final drive from Patrick Mahomes, where Chiefs are moving the ball, plenty of time to get into scoring position and try to put it in the end zone and just end it in regulation. And all of a sudden, on the final drive, that final series, Andy Reid just gives up on the drive and says, we're going to play for the field goal. Like, there was those final 3 plays on that offensive series. There was no attempt to even really get a first down, let alone continue to try to keep the drive alive and put it in the end zone just to end it in regulation and not have to settle for your liability kicker at this point. And they said no. And then they get the ball first in overtime. Patrick Mahomes gets sacked on 3rd down. They punt to the Texans. They catch a break that Davis Mills fumbles the football and they get it inside the Texans red zone, and Jerick McKinnon finishes things off. Like, they gave the Texans plenty of opportunities to win this game. And really, at the end of the day, it feels like they were lucky to escape Houston with a win, how they played offensively and defensively.
Oh my gosh. I mean, really, don't get me started on the Chiefs' reliance on Harrison Butker when you knew he was already unreliable in this game. And shout out to Robert Sanchez in the comments. I am going to need a stiff drink after this game. Like, most definitely. After watching this game and watching how this went down, I will definitely need a stiff drink. I got some 21-year-old Glenfiddich over here that I might have to tap into here once we get off this post game show. But yeah, like Harrison Butker's unreliable, and we've said it all along. The Chiefs rushed him back from injury, and Dave Tobe said he's not going to be 100% this year. What does that mean? That means he's not going to be reliable like he has been in the past. Like he's going to be battling against an ankle injury for a kicker all year long. And so what do? He's already shown that he's not locked in necessarily today. Like he missed a point after attempt. And so you're going to put the entire game on his foot at the end of the game when you got Patrick Mahomes at quarterback against the worst team in the NFL? Like, come on, man. Like it's not smart football. Like if you want to be a winning team and you want to be a Super Bowl contender, then drive down the field and win the game. Like that's as simple as it goes. Like you want to be a winning team, then drive down the field and win the game. Like don't play for the field goal.
And I wonder, Rocky, if, and you know, I know Pete and John talked about it this past week on the Arrowhead Pride Editor Show, where it was kind of a weird Andy Reid game against the Denver Broncos, where it did seem like he was being overly aggressive compared to most of the time where we see Andy take his foot off the gas and try to slow play these things and just not, you know, cost themselves the game by playing sloppy or something like that. And maybe he was overcompensating a little bit last week and being a little too aggressive. And then it was just polar opposite this week. And so maybe that played into the decision making in this game. He saw how sloppy they were playing and was just like, we just got to get out of here, and got too conservative down the stretch. But I don't think Harrison Butker's healthy, but there's reason to question just his effectiveness as a kicker at this point. Like he is becoming a liability for the Chiefs. The special teams in general are a liability for this team right now. You just don't get any playmaking from the special teams whatsoever, though. Kadarius Toney did return to the punt team today and had a couple of nice punts. And it's like, if he could just stay healthy and stay on the football field, maybe they've got something there. Maybe they've actually got a weapon back there. But overall, the special teams have been a detriment to this team all season long. And then when you mix all of that with a conservative Andy Reid and a kicker who is just down bad right now, like all of that's a recipe to lose football games. They still get it done as they should against a 1-win Houston Texans team. But this is going to be a game that I think we think about for a while, the way we think about that Colts loss and how the Chiefs allowed that to happen. They didn't lose this football game, but at the end of the season, when you're in the race for the number 1 overall seed and you're trying to get a bye, and you see how Buffalo just performed against a dangerous Miami Dolphins team, and then you play this way against the Houston Texans, it's worrisome. There's a lot of red flags that came out of today's game.
100%. And here's the whole thing. It's like none of the top teams in the NFL are necessarily playing their best football. These are the dog days of the season where you're just trying to close out your season and solidify your playoff position, right? Like Buffalo had to come from behind against a very dangerous Miami team, and that was a great victory for them. That was awesome. But I think if you ask Buffalo fans, they don't think that they played their best game. You look at Philadelphia right now, and they were I don't know how the game ended because we came on here, but they were in a slugfest with the Chicago Bears.
Philly did win.
They did win, but it wasn't a great game. Dallas lost to Jacksonville, if I'm right. They ended up losing to Jacksonville.
Yes, they did. It was
right.
So you pick 6 in overtime. Dak Prescott threw an interception. It was returned for a touchdown to win the game.
So none of these teams are necessarily playing their best down the stretch. They're just trying to close out the season, get to the playoffs. I'm sure it seems like a slog, but the difference is that this is 3 weeks in a row for the Chiefs. This isn't a one-off game. This is 3 games in a row where the Chiefs have played down to competition and not played as well against a team that they should have blown out. And that's the concerning part, is that this team seems to be in a downward trajectory that they haven't quite pulled themselves out of yet. And where's going to be rock bottom? Is rock bottom going to be next week? Are they going to lose next week and then end up as the number 2 seed and then say, oh, we got to wake up and start playing better? Or are they going to keep squeaking out these games against lesser teams and then first game in the playoffs just crash out against a good team, like end up playing against the Chargers or the Bengals and crash out? Like, I mean, at this point, that seems more likely than them waking up and then just running the table and being the team that we expected them to be.
Yeah, and next week's matchup against the Seattle Seahawks, and I know the Seahawks have floundered quite a bit lately, and they really need a win because their playoff hopes are drowning right now. And so Seattle really needs a win. That game's going to be on Saturday, Christmas Eve at noon. And I don't love the matchup, really, Rocky. The way this team is playing right now, defensively, like Seattle's got some serious weapons, and Kenneth Walker and DK Metcalf, and Tyler Lockett's probably going to be out of that game after suffering a finger injury. So they haven't officially ruled him out, but they've said he's going to be in doubt for next week's game against the Chiefs. So, but the way they're playing right now, it is worrisome, and you got 3 games to figure it out. And that's all they can do right now. You've got the Seahawks, you got another game against the Broncos, and then the Raiders. And, all of a sudden, this 3-game stretch right here at the end of the season where we were talking like, oh, they're going to run the table and you just need Buffalo to stumble. And Buffalo's got to take on the Cincinnati Bengals next week. So that's obviously going to be a really tough game for them. But Buffalo seems to be playing better, and they're getting things figured out defensively, whereas the Kansas City Chiefs now on a weekly basis continue to worry you. And all of a sudden, this 3-game stretch with the way that they're playing, I'm a little bit worried about it now, even though it's still favorable. It's still in the Kansas City Chiefs odds, but it's just hard to not be concerned with what they've shown us the last 2 weeks and the lack of improvement really in any way.
I mean, all season long, we've been saying, okay, the Chiefs need to figure out their offensive line. Their tackles are not protecting Patrick Mahomes well. They need to figure out their special teams. They've been having special teams problems all season. They need to figure out their pass rush. Their pass rush hasn't been up to par, and they don't get a solid pass rush. Okay, our secondary struggles against big wide receivers. We need to figure out what to do against big wide receivers. At some point, we're running out of time to figure it out. Like, there's no longer figure it out time. Like, we might just have to accept that this is just who we are. Like our offensive line probably isn't going to get better. Our pass rush probably isn't going to get better. Our secondary is not going to get better against tall wide receivers, which doesn't bode well against DK Metcalf next week. Our special teams is going to continue to make costly errors because they're not disciplined and they're not well coached this year. I mean, Dave Two's is the assistant head coach, and he's been with the team for 10 years. Every single thing that special teams done has his fingerprints on it. Like, he's 100% responsible for every single special teams misstep this year. And we know that Andy's loyal and he's never going to move on from a coach. And I'm not even calling for anybody's head right now. But what I'm saying is every single special teams error is on Dave Toub. And at this point, these flaws that the team have, they're not things that the team's going to work out. Like, this is just who we are at this point. And you just better hope that Mahomes, Kelsey, Juju Smith-Schuster, Jet McKinnon, who, by the way, we talked about a little bit in our private chat before this game. Jet McKinnon might be the second best offensive skill player outside of Travis Kelce right now. He was phenomenal today, and he's been phenomenal for weeks now. Like, he is a revelation, and the Chiefs need to at least get him 4 to 5 targets every single game and at least 10 to 11 touches. Because he's a weapon on offense. He's the guy who's the most reliable in pass protection, and he's a veteran who's going to protect the ball and move the ball down the field for you.
Yeah, and I think that's accurate. I do think that's why Kansas City was kind of saving him early in the season, and they really said as much all throughout the year. Like, we're just trying to make sure he's healthy and available for us later in the year. And they're starting to deploy him that way. Like, we've been saving you for this role all year long, so let's roll. And he's come up big in back-to-back games. And we saw Isaiah Pacheco just totally whiff on a blitz pickup today. They got Patrick Mahomes absolutely crushed in the backfield. And Jerick McKinnon is obviously much more reliable like that. He's the best pass blocker that they have in that backfield, and it's not even close. He's the best pass catching running back that they have, and it's not even close. And he's explosive, and he's got the vision. I think Jerick McKinnon is the most dangerous weapon that they have outside of Travis Kelce. Maybe there's an argument that Juju's the more reliable option there, and I think Juju has been great this season, but this offense is better when they're finding ways to get Jerick McKinnon involved. And I want to see that moving forward. That was one positive thing that came out of this game. But again, Kansas City Chiefs win their 7th straight AFC West division. And the way we're talking on this post-game show, it probably doesn't seem like it, but it's still a win. It was just an ugly win, hard-fought win, where Patrick Mahomes' play is probably going to be overlooked a little bit because it was such an ugly overall performance from Chiefs offensive line and the Chiefs defense. But Patrick Mahomes was great, and he was good enough in this game to get you a win. So I want to remind you guys, if you're listening to us on the podcast page, we will have all the post-game press conferences for you immediately after the show. So make sure you stick around for that. But let's get to some of our listener questions. Hashtag AP Rapid Reaction Show in the comments section if you want to try to sneak something in here at the last minute. The play calling has not been good. That play call on 3rd and 4 was horrible. The short passes have worked all game, and they go for a deep play. Yeah, I think that Andy Reid gets in these funks sometimes, and then we'll see a game where they have this offensive explosion and everything works to perfection. I hope they get out of it offensively, because the offense is the key to this team winning a Super Bowl and trying to go on a playoff run. But they're struggling right now. And really, I don't even think it's as much on Andy. It has a lot more, in my opinion, to do with their execution, which has been poor recently, and the offensive line play is getting worse and worse every week. And that's affecting Patrick Mahomes, because he was getting lit up today by the Houston Texans. And the Houston Texans do not have a defensive line that you should be scared of. And they were laying hits on Patrick Mahomes today because the protection was so bad.
Yeah, I mean, pass protection, blitz pickup, it was all bad today. And I think that there is something to be said as far as the play calling goes. We know that Andy Reid notoriously scripts X number of plays, whether it's 12, 14, 20. I've heard different numbers over the years. But if you think about it today, that script, whatever he scripted today, didn't start off well. Like whatever he scripted for today's game didn't go well, because both the first 2 drives stalled. And so there is something to be said that maybe today's script just wasn't what he was expecting, and it wasn't good enough. And I like Serda said, like it's late in the season, things are getting stale, things are getting in a funk. There's a lot of tape on the Chiefs offense at this point, and they got to find a way to freshen it up.
I think they will. I think there is something to Andy Reid saving things for the playoffs and stuff like that. So
100%.
I think offensively they will be fine. They just got to figure out how to get Patrick Mahomes some better protection, because the offensive line has not been good enough over the last couple of weeks. Silver lining, how about Jared Mother Bleeping McKinnon? Jarek McKinnon, not Jared. I thought I was going to say Jared Goff for a second. MVP of the team, carried the team today despite Patrick Mahomes, 36. I mean, McKinnon was great again. Mahomes was great too, despite the fact that his protection failed him time and time again in this contest. But like we just talked about, I think that Jerick McKinnon is the most explosive and dangerous offensive weapon that they have outside of Travis Kelce. And, Juju's the reliable chain mover, but I think Jerick McKinnon's continued expanding role in the passing game is going to be something that can hopefully help them get out of this funk, and something that will really unlock the Chiefs defense ahead of the playoffs.
Yeah, I really agree with that. And I mean, yeah, of course, Patrick Mahomes is the greatest quarterback who's ever played football. Any criticism of this team isn't necessarily a criticism of Patrick Mahomes, except for when he deserves it. But I mean, Mahomes is the greatest quarterback that's ever played the game. I mean, so the problem with this team is that Mahomes can't do everything. And so Jerick McKinnon has been a breath of fresh air that's really kind of taken the load off of Mahomes a little bit and given him that outlet pass, or that guy to the flat, or that screen pass, or that guy who's going to protect him in the blitz pickup that he can count on. I mean, because Mahomes can't do it all. And so McKinnon, along with Mahomes, have been 2 of the bright spots of this bad run, because both have still been playing well.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's been like I mentioned already earlier in the show. Like I think they were legitimately trying to save him for this late season run and in the playoffs, because they saw how effective he was last season for them in the playoffs. Like he is a consistent weapon for them in the passing game, and they got to find a way to keep him involved in the offense. Chiefs haven't had a great pass rusher since Derek Thomas. Well, I mean, I think Justin Houston and Tom Bahali were pretty good. Justin Houston's still out here making plays, and he's having a pretty nice season for the Baltimore Ravens at his age. So they've had good pass rushers since Derek Thomas. Maybe not one that was quite as special as Derek Thomas, but it's hard to find these guys. And the defensive line is not winning you football games right now. So it's hard. It's hard to disagree with that. But the Chiefs have at least had some good pass rushers over the years, just maybe not this season.
I think that the issue is that the Chiefs have had great pass rushers since Derek Thomas. The Chiefs notoriously have had wonderful edge rushers. Like you got Derek Thomas, you got Tom Bahali, you got Justin Houston, you got Jared Allen, who was a freaking madman coming off of the edge, right? A late round selection who turned out to be one of the best pass rushers of his era, of his time, who went on to the Vikings and still produced big. I mean, that the Chiefs have had pass rushers throughout their history. Pass rush has never been the Chiefs' issue, until this most recent, Spags took over as defensive coordinator, which is funny because Spags has always been known as a guy who creates a lot of pressure off of the edges. And so the Chiefs have to find pass rush. It's not like them not to have pass rushers. And it's their identity has been getting after the quarterback on defense for as long as I can remember. I mean, go back even further. Buck Buchanan. I mean, you go all the way back to the beginning of the Chiefs. They've always got after the quarterback. Always. And so the fact that they don't do now is an aberration to their history.
And, like we've talked about too, it's the defensive struggles are not all on the defensive line either. Like I give Trent McDuffie and Joshua Williams and Jalen Watson, like those guys, I give them a little bit of a pass this season because I think they were thrust into a difficult situation, and Kansas City certainly didn't expect to start three rookies who were playing significant snaps for you in your secondary this season. But it's the safety play that has been a total detriment to your secondary. Like Justin Reed and Juan Thornhill just are not giving you enough back there. And it's collectively as a group, the defense isn't giving you enough right now. You just aren't getting enough out of that side of the ball to make you feel good about the Kansas City Chiefs right now. But thank you guys for listening to this edition of the Arrowhead Pride Rapid Reaction Show. Please make sure you follow Rocky on Twitter at Rocky Magana. You can follow Kramer on Twitter as well at Kramer Talks. Again, make sure you stick around after the show. We've got all the post-game press conferences for you if you're listening to us on the podcast page. And as always, please make sure you subscribe, rate, and review everything that we are doing on the Arrowhead Pride Podcast Network. If you listen to the Arrowhead Pride Editor Show, we are on the road to 1,000 reviews right now. Pete Sweeney's going to eat an entire ice cream cake if you can help us pull that off before the NFL postseason. So we'd really appreciate your help there. But after that, Kansas City Chiefs win, take the AFC West for the 7th straight season. We will talk to you guys this week ahead of the Chiefs Saturday matchup against the Seattle Seahawks.